Hi there, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm a personal bankruptcy attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'd like to talk to you today about defaulting on a private student loan. Now, I've done a number of videos about student loans, and if you follow them, then you know that there are two different types of student loans. You have the government issued or guaranteed student loans involving the Department of Education, which makes up about 80% of all student loans out there. Then you have private student loans. This might be companies like Discover or Chase. There's any number of companies that are private, not affiliated with the government. They will issue student loans as well. A lot of times I see them when people are going to private colleges where the tuition is much higher than what the government student loans, the limits are. Private student loans are really not a good thing. I mean, I always tell people, I've got a number of friends who have kids who are college aged, and I tell them, if you can avoid private student loans, you should. There's nothing good at all about them. The way the law is structured, you basically have no recourse. There's no payment plans. There's no income-based repayment programs like you have with government loans. Private student loans are really, really evil. So if you can avoid them, avoid them. But assuming you've got one and you go into default, what can you do? And actually, I had this come up the other day. Somebody called me. They're getting sued by a private student loan creditor. What can you do? Well, not a lot of options. Obviously, one would be to figure out a way to pay that student loan, and that may mean to liquidate an asset, to sell something so you can get the money to pay it, because again, there's really not much you can do with it otherwise. Bankruptcy is not a great option in terms of discharging it, because you've got to show something called undue hardship, which is very, very difficult to do, plus it's expensive. So you're not going to be able to discharge it in student loan, in bankruptcy, a student loan, private student loan in bankruptcy. You could, if you go into a bankruptcy, you can use Chapter 7 to get rid of everything else and to surrender houses and cars and things like that, so you have more cash flow that you can use to pay your private student loans. And even though that's a really unattractive concept, I have done that where I've used Chapter 7 to get rid of everything else so my client could then focus all disposable money on paying that student loan. Kind of a last resort option, but it is out there. A more creative use of bankruptcy would be to go into a Chapter 13, which is a payment plan, and basically put that private student loan into essentially suspense for up to 5 years. Take care of all the rest of your debts, reduce them as much as you can, and in 5 years, then you'll have to deal with the private student loan. Now, the reason why this strategy can make sense is that in 5 years, we don't know what the laws are going to look like. It may be that there is going to be more relief for private student loan creditors. There's also an opportunity once the bankruptcy is over, if the statute of limitations has run, I believe there's a very short period of time that the private student loan creditor can pursue you, at least at this point. So this may be a good time to try to negotiate some sort of a deal. So that may be something. You can talk to your attorney about it, but it may be useful to go into a Chapter 13 to delay dealing with the private student loan debt and then deal with it in 5 years when things may be very different. Again, it's somewhat hypothetical to think about what could be, but it's something to look at. The other thing you could look at would be, is there any sort of remedy against the private student loan creditor for violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act? We see that sometimes, especially when they use a collection agency where they may do improper tactics in terms of collection. That may give you some leverage to settle it. And of course, the last thing would be to try to settle it. Some private student loan lenders are willing to take something less than 100 cents on the dollar. I've seen it as low as 70%, where if you can get the cash together, you can settle it for 70%. So that may be something to look at as well. But do not let it go into judgment where they can garnish your wages and seize real estate and things like that, bank accounts, without talking to an attorney. So if you are sued by a private student loan creditor, it's worthwhile to pick up the phone, call an attorney, bankruptcy attorney typically, see what your options look like, and maybe there's a way to buy yourself some time. Maybe there's a way to negotiate something so it doesn't go into judgment, because again, if it goes into a judgment, then your wages are at risk, your bank account's at risk, your real estate's at risk, all kind of bad stuff can happen. But just beware that private student loan creditors, if they sue you, they kind of hold most of the cards, and you got to get creative when it comes time to figuring out what to do with it. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you've got one of these situations and you'd like to talk about it, please feel free to contact me. I hope that you found this video helpful. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Like us on Facebook, and if you have any questions, please let me know that as well. So Thank you very much for your time. We'll see you next video.